The big day had finally arrived. My heart was pounding as, standing in front of the mirror, I adjusted my wedding dress for the umpteenth time. The rays of the morning sun filtered through the lace curtains, illuminating the room with a golden glow. I could hardly believe that in a few hours I would be Mrs. Isabel Fernandez. "You look beautiful, darling," my mother whispered tearfully as she entered the room. She walked over to me and placed the veil over my carefully combed hair. "Carlos is a lucky man." I smiled, but I couldn't help but feel a little anxious. "Thank you, Mom. I hope everything goes well today." My mother must have noticed my concern because she grabbed my hands and looked me straight in the eyes. "Isabel, don't let Dolores spoil your happiness. This is your day, my daughter." "Ah, Dolores. My future mother-in-law." The thought of her made my stomach knot. Ever since Carlos had introduced me to his parents 2 years ago, Dolores had made no secret of her disagreement. To her, I was nothing more than a schoolteacher, not refined or cultured enough for her precious son. "I know, Mom," I replied, trying to sound confident. "I won't let it upset me." But deep down he knew that would be easier said than done. The months of wedding preparations had been a veritable obstacle course, plagued by Dolores' scathing comments and thinly disguised criticism. A soft knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. It was Sophia, my best friend and maid of honor. "Isabel, the limo has arrived. Are you ready?" Her enthusiasm was infectious and I felt a surge of excitement momentarily dispel my worries. The ride to the winery where the ceremony would take place was a whirlwind of emotions. Sitting in the back of the limousine, I watched the Catalan landscape pass by, trying to concentrate on the happiness that awaited me rather than the apprehension that churned my stomach. "You know," Sophia says, taking my hand, "I hear the estate is absolutely magnificent. Carlos really chose well." I smile, grateful for her attempt to distract me. "Yes, it's true. It's a magical place. Do you remember the first time we went?" Sophia laughs. "How could I forget? You were so nervous you almost knocked over a whole row of wine bottles at the tasting." We both burst out laughing, and for a moment I felt light and carefree, as if it was just another day of adventures with my best friend. But when the limo pulled into the cypress-lined driveway of the estate, reality caught up with me. Guests were already beginning to arrive and I could see the bustle around the large stone building. "Take a deep breath, Isabel," my mother said, squeezing my hand. "Everything is going to be all right." I nodded, unable to speak. The car stopped in front of a small outbuilding where I was to wait before the ceremony. As I got out, my attention was drawn to a familiar figure standing near the main entrance. Dolores. Even from a distance, I could feel her look of disapproval. She was wearing a dark purple, almost black dress that seemed to absorb all the light around her. Her lips were pursed, as if she had just tasted something particularly unpleasant. "Don't pay attention to him," Sophia murmured as she guided me toward the toilet. "Concentrate on Carlos and your love." The next few hours passed like a dream. The final preparations, the photographers, the hugs with family and friends who came to wish me luck. And then, finally, the long-awaited moment arrived. The music started to play and the doors of the small chapel of the estate opened. My father took my arm, smiled proudly at me and we began to walk. The center aisle seemed endless. I could feel all eyes on me, but I was only looking for one face. And then I saw it. Carlos. My Carlos. He was standing at the altar, magnificent in his black suit, and his face lit up as soon as he saw me. In his eyes I saw all the love in the world and suddenly nothing else mattered. The ceremony was beautiful and moving. We exchanged our vows, our wedding rings and finally the kiss that sealed our union. The applause and cheers of the guests resounded in the small chapel and, for a moment, I felt invincible. But the euphoria was short-lived. As I left the chapel under a shower of rose petals, I met Dolores' gaze. Her expression was indecipherable, but I could feel her disapproval as a physical presence. The reception was held in the magnificent gardens of the estate. Tables had been set up under large white tents and the air was filled with the scent of flowers and wine. Guests crowded around us to congratulate us, and I smiled and laughed, almost forgetting my worries. Carlos didn't leave my side, his hand firmly intertwined with mine. "You are the most beautiful bride the world has ever seen," he whispered in my ear as we made our way to the table. I blushed with pleasure. And you are the cutest bride and groom. I love you so much, Carlos. He kissed me tenderly. I love you too, Isabel. More than anything in the world. We took our seats at the head table, surrounded by our parents and witnesses. I couldn't help noticing that Dolores was sitting as far away from me as possible, chatting quietly with one of her friends. The meal was delicious, a feast of Catalan specialties washed down with the best wines of the estate. The atmosphere was cheerful and relaxed, and I began to think that maybe, just maybe, my fears had been unfounded. Then Dolores stood up, glass in hand. There was silence in the assembly as she cleared her throat. Dear friends, dear guests, he began in a clear voice that carried far and wide. We are gathered here today to celebrate the union of my son, Charles, and his lovely wife, Isabel. I felt Carlos stiffen beside me. His hand reached for mine under the table and squeezed hard. Dolores continued, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. As tradition dictates, I would like to propose a toast to the newlyweds. But first, I have a small request. My heart began to beat faster. What was I going to do? Isabel, she said, turning to me, I hear you have a beautiful voice. Won't you do us the honor of singing something to celebrate your love for my son? I froze, unable to move or speak. To sing? In front of everyone? Without music or preparation? Mother, Carlos interjected in a strained voice, I don't think this is the moment. But Dolores interrupted him with a wave of her hand. Come on, darling. I'm sure your wife won't refuse to show us her talent. Unless, of course, she can't. I felt everyone staring at me. The air seemed to have become thin and I could hardly breathe. I knew what Dolores was trying to do. She wanted to humiliate me, embarrass me in front of all our guests. To prove once again that I was not up to the task. But something inside me rebelled. I couldn't let her win. Not today. Not on my wedding day. I got up slowly. Carlos looked at me with concern, but I gave him a reassuring smile. Then I turned to Dolores. Of course, dear stepmother, I said in a voice I tried to keep steady. I will be delighted to sing to celebrate my love for Carlos. Dolores' triumphant smile faltered slightly and was replaced by a flash of surprise. It was clear she hadn't expected me to accept her challenge. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes briefly to steel myself. When I opened them again, I met Carlos' gaze. In his eyes I saw love, pride, and absolute confidence. It gave me the strength I needed. Without music, without accompaniment, I began to sing. The silence that followed my acceptance of Dolores' challenge was deafening. I could feel all eyes on me, waiting with curiosity mixed with apprehension. Dolores, for her part, wore a satisfied smile, convinced that she was finally going to make a fool of me in front of all our guests. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my frantic heartbeat. Time seemed to stand still, and for a brief moment I was tempted to run away. But Carlos' loving gaze gave me the strength to stay. What song do you want me to sing, dear stepmother? I asked, trying to remain calm. Dolores' smile widened, revealing perfectly white teeth. Oh, honey, I'll leave the choice to you. After all, it's your big day, why don't you surprise us with something that really expresses your feelings for Carlos? I nodded, fully aware of the trap that loomed ahead of me. Without musical accompaniment, without preparation, it would be easy to stumble, lose the rhythm or sing off-key. And Dolores knew it. Carlos stood up in turn, placing a protective hand on my arm. Mother, I really don't think this is necessary. Isabel doesn't have to prove anything. But Dolores dismissed his objection with a wave of her hand. Come on, Carlos. Your wife has accepted. Don't deprive her of this opportunity to show us her talent. I placed my hand on Carlos and gave him a reassuring smile. Everything will be fine, my love, I murmured. Then I turned to our guests. Dear friends and family, I am going to sing a song that has special meaning for Carlos and me. My heart was beating so fast that I was sure everyone could hear it. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to concentrate and find the strength within me to face this moment. When I opened them again, my eyes met my mother's eyes. She gave me a small sign of encouragement, her eyes shining with pride and love. She reminded me of all the times when, as a child, she had encouraged me to overcome my fears, to face challenges with courage. I took a last deep breath and began to sing. The first notes of El Cant dels Ocells, that magnificent traditional Catalan song, rose into the air. My voice, hesitant at first, gained confidence as the lyrics progressed. I concentrated on the melody and the lyrics, which spoke of love and hope. Quan vel temps de floria, el rossinyol torna al nyo, sota les brancs dun pi, or essa dorm el su tracer. As I sang, I watched the expressions on the faces around me change. Surprise gave way to astonishment. Even Dolores looked puzzled, her smirk replaced by an expression of confusion. I kept singing, my voice rising and falling with the melody. The lyrics flowed naturally, as if I had rehearsed the song hundreds of times. In fact, he had, but no one in the room, apart from Carlos, knew it. Ocells que honor pelmon, ocells que honor pelmon, degur els destarats, que sempre els espera un cor. When I arrived at the choir, I saw tears glistening in the eyes of some of the guests. Carlos was looking at me with an expression of pure adoration, and I felt my heart swell with love for him. The song was coming to an end, and I poured my soul into the last notes. My voice rose one last time, clear and pure, before fading softly. The silence that followed was almost palpable. For a moment, no one moved, as if everyone was holding their breath. Then, suddenly, thunderous applause broke out. Guests rose to their feet, some wiping away tears, others smiling broadly. Carlos was the first to join me, wrapping me in a passionate embrace. "That was beautiful, love," he whispered in my ear. "You're amazing." I snuggled against him, relieved and excited. All around us, guests were still clapping, some shouting another one, but my attention was drawn to Dolores. She was sitting with her champagne glass in her hand and an indecipherable expression on her face. Our gazes met and, for the first time, I thought I saw a hint of respect in her eyes. But the moment was short-lived. Dolores recovered quickly and stood up gracefully. She approached us with her usual smile. "Well, my dear," he said in a honeyed voice, "what a surprising performance. I didn't expect you to have such aptitude." I felt Carlos stiffen beside me, but I put a reassuring hand on his arm. "Thank you, Dolores," I replied calmly. "Music has always been an important part of my life." Dolores raised an eyebrow. "Really? And yet I've never heard you talk about it. Or sing, for that matter." I smiled, refusing to lose my balance. "There are many things you don't know about me, dear mother-in-law. Perhaps this day will be an opportunity for us to get to know each other better." A flash of annoyance flashed through Dolores' eyes, but she merely nodded and walked away, her dark purple dress mingling with the crowd of guests still congratulating me. Carlos hugged me. "You were extraordinary, Isabel. I am so proud of you." I looked at him, my heart overflowing with love. "Thank you for always believing in me, Carlos." He leaned toward me and kissed me tenderly. "Always, my love. Always." The rest of the evening went by like a dream. The guests kept complimenting me on my voice, asking me where I had learned to sing like that. I answered evasively, keeping my secret for the moment. Sophia, my best friend and maid of honor, pulled me aside at one point. "Isabel, that was amazing. Why didn't you ever tell me you sang like that?" I laugh and squeeze her hand in mine. "It's a long story, Sophie. I promise I'll tell it to you soon." As the evening progressed and the guests began to leave, I couldn't help but think back to that moment. Dolores' challenge, which was meant to humiliate me, had turned into an unexpected triumph. I had revealed a part of me that I had kept hidden for so long, and the reaction had been more positive than I could ever have imagined. However, I knew this was only the beginning. Dolores would not give up so easily. She may have lost this battle, but the war was far from over. I could feel her gaze on me throughout the night, calculating and thoughtful. As Carlos and I were about to leave for our wedding night, Dolores approached us for the last time. "Isabel," she said, her sweet voice contrasting with the hardness of her gaze, "I have to admit that you have surprised us all tonight. Who would have thought that a simple school teacher could hide so much talent?" I felt Carlos tense up next to me, but I kept my composure. "Life is full of surprises, isn't it?" Dolores? She stared at me for a moment, as if trying to penetrate my secrets. Then, with a last forced smile, he wished us good night and left. In the car taking us to our bridal suite, I curled up next to Carlos, exhausted but happy. You know, he says, gently stroking my hair, I think my mother is finally starting to realize how amazing you are. I smiled, but I couldn't help but feel a twinge of concern. That may be, but I fear it will make her even more determined to find my faults. Carlos hugged me tighter. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. You are not alone now, Isabel. We are a team. I looked at him, my heart overflowing with love and gratitude. Yes, we are. And together, we can overcome anything. As the car drove into the night, I remembered this incredible day. Dolores' challenge, which was supposed to be my humiliation, had turned into a moment of triumph. I had revealed a part of me that I had kept hidden for so long, and the reaction had been more positive than I could have ever imagined. But I knew that this was only the beginning of a new adventure. An adventure that I was going to live hand in hand with the man I loved, ready to face all the challenges that life and my mother-in-law could throw at us. The days following our wedding were a whirlwind of happiness and excitement. Carlos and I had gone on our honeymoon to the Amalfi Coast, enjoying the Italian sunshine and our new life as a married couple. However, even in the midst of this paradise, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened at our wedding reception and what awaited us upon our return. One evening, as we sat on the balcony of our hotel room, admiring the sunset over the Mediterranean, Carlos took my hand in his. "What are you thinking about, my love?" he asked softly. I sighed, turning to him. "I was thinking about the reception, about my song, about your mother." Carlos nodded, understanding. "You were amazing that night, Isabel. You surprised everyone, including my mother." I smile faintly. "Yes, but now I wonder, maybe I should have told you the truth earlier. About the conservatory, about my training." Carlos hugged me. "You had nothing to prove, Isabel. You wanted to be loved for who you are, not for your talent or your title. There's nothing wrong with that." I snuggle against him, grateful for his understanding. "I know. It's just, now that the secret's partly out, I wonder what things will be like when we get back. Your mother is sure to have questions." Carlos kissed my head. "We'll manage together, my love. You are not alone now." His words comforted me, but I couldn't help remembering those years at the Conservatory Superior de Música del Liceo in Barcelona. Those years of hard work, passion, and dreams. I had always loved music. As a child I sang constantly, at home, at school and even in the street. My parents saw my passion and enrolled me in singing lessons from the age of 8. My teacher, Madame Roig, quickly realized my potential. "Isabel," she told me one day after a particularly successful class, "you have a gift. A real gift. You should consider making music your profession." I laughed at the time. Me, a professional singer? It was too big a dream, too crazy. But Madame Roig insisted, talked to my parents, encouraged them to let me audition for the conservatory. I still remember the day of the audition. I was terrified, my hands were shaking so much that I could barely hold the score. But as soon as I started singing, everything disappeared. It was just me and the music. When I received the letter of admission, I cried with joy. It was the beginning of a new life, a life dedicated to music. My years at the conservatory were intense and demanding, but also incredibly enriching. I learned much more than just how to sing. I studied music theory, music history, and composition. I discovered musical genres I had never heard of and explored my voice in ways I had never thought possible. My teachers were demanding but encouraging. I especially remember M. Casols, my main singing teacher. He was a stern man who hardly smiled, but who hid a heart of gold beneath his austere appearance. "Miss Navarro," he often told me, "you have an exceptional voice. But never forget that talent is not enough. It takes work, discipline and, above all, passion. Without passion, the most beautiful voice is nothing more than an empty instrument." These words have accompanied me throughout my studies. I worked hard, pushing my voice to its limits, exploring its potential. I spent countless hours in rehearsal rooms, rehearsing over and over again, perfecting every note, every nuance. But despite all this hard work, despite the praise from my teachers and the applause at recitals, one doubt lingered inside me. Was I good enough to pursue music? I knew that the world of opera and classical singing was ruthless. For every singer who succeeded, how many failed? It was then that I made a decision that would change the course of my life. Instead of embarking on a career as a singer after graduation, I chose to become a teacher. I loved children. I loved the idea of passing on my passion for music in another way. Of course, it was not an easy choice. My teachers were disappointed, my parents surprised. But for me it was the right decision. I could keep singing, keep practicing my passion, but without the crushing pressure of a professional career. And then I met Carlos. From the first moment we met, I knew he was something special. He was kind, funny, smart. And, above all, he loved me for who I was, not for what I could do. Early in our relationship, I told him about my studies at the conservatory and my love of music. He was fascinated and asked me to sing for him. But when he wanted to introduce me to his family, a strange fear came over me. What if his family judged me? What if they thought I wasn't good enough for Carlos because I had chosen to be a teacher instead of a professional singer? Or worse, what if they thought I was a failed artist who had returned to teaching? So I made a decision. I would not talk about my studies at the conservatory. I would simply be Isabel, the teacher. Carlos was surprised when I asked him to keep my musical past a secret, but he respected my decision. If that's what you want, my love, he said, then that's what we'll do. But know that I'm proud of you, of all that you are. Years went by. I met Carlos' family, including his mother, Dolores. From the beginning I felt her disapproval. To her, I was no more than a schoolteacher, not refined or cultured enough for her precious son. I was often tempted to tell her the truth, to show her that I was more than she thought I was. But each time, fear held me back. What if she judged me more harshly? What if she thought I had wasted my potential? So I kept quiet, putting up with his condescending comments and his little digs. Carlos always defended me, but I knew the situation hurt him. He hated being caught between me and his mother. And then there was tonight, at our wedding. Dolores' defiance. Her smirk when she asked me to sing. He thought he was fooling me, humiliating me. He didn't know that he was giving me the opportunity to reveal a part of me that I had kept hidden for so long. When I started singing El Cant dels Ocells, I saw the surprise on her face, and on the faces of all the guests. For the first time, I saw the respect in Dolores' eyes, if only for a brief moment. Now, sitting on this balcony in Italy, I wonder what will happen next. How will I explain my years at the conservatory? How will Dolores react when she learns the whole truth? Isabel? Carlos' voice brings me back to the present. Are you sure you're okay? I turn to him, to this wonderful man who has always supported me, who has loved me for who I really am. And suddenly I know what I have to do. Yes, I'm fine, I reply with a smile. In fact, I think I already know what I'm going to do when we get back. Carlos raises an eyebrow, curious. Yeah. And what's that? I take a deep breath. I'm going to tell your mother the truth. To everybody. I'm going to tell them about the conservatory, about my studies, about everything. It's time for me to stop hiding this part of me. Carlos hugs me, smiling broadly. I'm so proud of you, my love. And I'll be here by your side, no matter what. I snuggle against him and feel a weight lifted off my shoulders. Yes, the future is uncertain. Yes, Dolores' reaction may be difficult. But for the first time in a long time, I feel free. Free to be myself, without fear or shame. The sun disappears over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and violet. Another day ends, and with it a part of my life. Tomorrow a new Isabel will dawn. An Isabel ready to face the world, her mother-in-law and her own past with courage and pride. After all, as Mr. Casals told me so many times at the conservatory, music is the language of the soul. And a soul that sings is a soul that cannot be silenced. The day of our return to Barcelona came faster than I would have liked. Despite my determination to tell Dolores and everyone else the truth, I couldn't help but feel a little apprehensive. Carlos, true to his promise, was by my side, supporting me every step of the way. We had barely moved into our new apartment when the phone rang. It was Dolores, of course, inviting us to dinner at her house that evening. She hasn't wasted any time, Carlos muttered as he hung up. I took a deep breath. Maybe it's for the best. I'd better face the situation now. Carlos hugged me and kissed me on the forehead. Are you sure you want to do this tonight? We just got back. I nodded, determined. Yes, I'm sure. The longer I wait, the harder it will be. A few hours later, we found ourselves in front of Carlos' parents' big house. My heart was pounding as we rang the doorbell. It was Dolores herself who opened the door, dressed in an elegant black dress that contrasted with her forced smile. Carlos, Isabel, she greeted us. Please come in. I hope your trip went well. We followed her to the main hall, where her husband, Antonio, was waiting for us. Unlike his wife, he greeted us warmly, embracing us in turn. Tell us all about your honeymoon, he asked eagerly. When Carlos started talking about our stay in Italy, I felt Dolores' piercing gaze on me. I knew she was waiting for the right moment to broach the subject that really interested her. The moment came sooner than expected. As soon as we sat down at the table, Dolores said in a falsely casual tone, Isabel, my dear, I was very impressed with your performance at the wedding. I didn't know that schoolteachers received such profound training in singing. I felt Carlos stiffen beside me, but I put a reassuring hand on his arm. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the chance to reveal the truth. Actually, Dolores, I began, taking a deep breath, there is something I have to tell you. All of you. All eyes turned to me. I felt Carlos' hand grab mine from under the table, silently encouraging me. I didn't learn to sing like that as a teacher. In fact, I studied at the Conservatorio Superior de Música del Liceo de Barcelona. I graduated there a few years ago. A stunned silence followed my statement. Antonio was the first to break it. The Liceo Conservatory? But it's one of the best music schools in Spain. Dolores, for her part, looked at me with an indecipherable expression. I don't understand, she said slowly. If you studied at such an institution, why did you become a teacher? And why didn't you ever tell us about it? I took a deep breath. It was time to explain everything to them, to lay myself bare before them. I've always loved music, I began. From a very young age, singing was my passion. When I was admitted to the conservatory, it was like a dream come true. I spent years studying, perfecting my voice, learning everything I could about music. I paused, searching for my words. But toward the end of my studies I began to have doubts. The world of classical music is ruthless. For every singer who succeeds, hundreds fail. I was afraid of not measuring up, of wasting years of my life chasing a dream that might never come true. I saw a glimmer of understanding in Antonio's eyes. Dolores remained impassive. So I made a choice, I continued. I chose to become a teacher. I could still use my musical training, but in a different way. I could pass on my passion to the children, inspire them as my teachers had inspired me. I turned to Carlos, smiling warmly. And then I met Carlos. For the first time, I met someone who loved me for who I was, not for what I could do with my voice. Carlos smiled back, squeezing my hand a little tighter. But when it came time to meet your family, I continued, looking Dolores straight in the eye, I was afraid. Afraid that they would judge me, afraid that they would think I had failed, that I was a failed singer who had gone into teaching. So I decided to keep my past a secret. The silence that followed my confession was deafening. I could almost hear the gears turning in Dolores' head as she processed everything she had just said. Finally, it was Antonio who spoke. Isabel, he said softly, I'm sorry you felt the need to hide that. You should know that we are proud of you, whatever you do, right, Dolores? All eyes turned to Dolores. She took a sip of wine, as if to buy time before answering. I have to admit, she began slowly, that I'm surprised. And a little hurt that you felt it necessary to keep this from us. I looked down, feeling guilty. But Dolores wasn't finished. However, she continued, I understand why you did it. And I must admit that your performance at the wedding was remarkable. I raised my head, surprised by what almost sounded like a compliment. But, Dolores added, and I felt my heart clench, I still don't understand why you gave up a potentially brilliant career to become a schoolteacher. Isn't that a waste of your talent? I felt Carlos tense up beside me, ready to defend me, but I put a hand on his arm. It was my turn to respond. It's not a waste, Dolores, I say firmly. It's a choice. A choice I made with a clear conscience. I love teaching. I love seeing children's eyes light up when they discover music. I love knowing that I can make a difference in their lives, just as my teachers have made a difference in mine. I took a deep breath before continuing. And I haven't given up music. I'm still singing. I give private lessons. I participate in choirs. Music is still an integral part of my life. But now it's on my own terms, without the overwhelming pressure of a professional career. Dolores looked at me for a long moment, as if really seeing me for the first time. I see, she said at last. I guess I can understand that. The rest of the dinner passed in a more relaxed atmosphere. Antonio asked me many questions about my studies at the conservatory, clearly fascinated. Even Dolores seemed to soften a bit, asking me what my favorite pieces to play were. As we were about to leave, Dolores took me aside. Isabel, she said, her voice softer than ever, I owe you an apology. I was hasty in judging you, based on incomplete information. It wasn't fair of me. I was so shocked I didn't know what to say. Dolores continued, I hope we can start over. Maybe, you could come to dinner again next week? We could talk in more detail about your music career. I felt a smile tug at my lips. It will be my pleasure, Dolores. Thank you. On the way home, Carlos kept looking at me with pride. You were amazing, my love, he told me. I knew my mother would eventually see how extraordinary you are. I smiled, feeling a huge weight lifted off my shoulders. For the first time since I had met Carlos' family, I felt truly accepted. That night, as we prepared for bed, I couldn't help but hum softly. Carlos joined me, hugging me from behind. You know, he whispered in my ear, I've always thought your voice was magical. But tonight, when you spoke of your passion for teaching and music, it was the most beautiful melody I've ever heard. I turned in his arms, touched by his words. I love you, Carlos. Thank you for always being there for me. I love you too, Isabel, he replied, kissing me tenderly. And I will always be there, for every note, every song, every moment of your life. As I drifted off to sleep that night, lulled by the steady beat of Carla's heart, I realized that I had finally found my true voice. A voice that didn't need to hide, a voice that I could sing freely, whether it was in a classroom, on a stage, or simply in the arms of the man I loved. It had been a long and sometimes difficult road, but I had finally learned the most important lesson. True music comes not only from the voice, but also from the heart. And my heart was finally in perfect harmony with my life. The weeks following our revealing dinner at Carla's parents' house were a whirlwind of emotions and changes. My relationship with Dolores had improved considerably, although I had the feeling that she still found it difficult to fully understand my decisions. However, it was clear that she was making an effort, regularly inviting me over for tea and asking me many questions about my musical training. One day, as we sat in her garden sipping an Earl Grey, Dolores surprised me with an unexpected question. Isabel, have you ever thought of taking up singing again in a more professional way? I almost choked on my tea. What do you mean, Dolores? She put down her cup and looked at me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. Well, with your training and talent, don't you think you could do more? I'm not saying teaching isn't noble, but... I interrupted gently. Dolores, I appreciate your interest, but I really love what I do. Teaching fulfills me. She nodded, but I could tell she wasn't entirely convinced. I was beginning to wonder if her apparent acceptance of my situation was actually an attempt to push me toward what she considered a more worthy career. This conversation disturbed me more than I wanted to admit. That night, lying next to Carlos, I couldn't stop thinking about his mother's words. What's wrong, love? Asked Carlos, noticing my agitation. I told him about my conversation with his mother. She sighed and hugged me tighter. Don't let my mother make you doubt yourself, Isabel. You're happy in your work, that's all that matters. Her words comforted me, but a small doubt lingered. What if Dolores was right? What if I was really wasting my potential? Over the next few days, I thought more and more about my career. I loved teaching, that was true. But part of me couldn't help but wonder what if. With this idea in mind, I accepted an invitation from Sofia, my best friend, to attend a classical music concert at the Palau de la Música Catalana. The program included several of my favorite arias, and I was looking forward to hearing them performed by professionals. The night of the concert, as we sat in the magnificent hall, my heart was racing with excitement. The atmosphere was electric, full of anticipation. The lights went out and the concert began. From the first notes, I felt transported. The music enveloped me and reminded me why I had fallen in love with singing. Then came the moment I had been waiting for, the aria Un bel di Vidremo from Madame Butterfly. The soprano came on stage, resplendent in her evening gown. She took a deep breath and began to sing. But something wasn't right. Her voice was beautiful, of course, but something was missing. The emotion, the passion that I knew was at the heart of this aria was not there. I closed my eyes and imagined how I would have interpreted it. Suddenly, I felt a hand on my arm. I opened my eyes and saw Sofia looking at me with a strange expression. "Isabel," she whispered, "you were singing." I blinked in surprise. I hadn't even realized I was humming softly, following the melody. "Oh, sorry," I muttered, embarrassed. But Sofia shook her head. "No, you don't understand." She was beautiful. Much better than the singer on stage. I blushed, not knowing what to say. The rest of the concert passed in a haze, my mind swirling with conflicting thoughts and emotions. After the concert, as we headed to a nearby cafe for a drink, Sofia kept talking about my impromptu performance. "I can't believe you keep a voice like that hidden," she exclaimed. "You should be on that stage, not in the audience." I laughed, trying to play it down. "Sofia, stop it. It was just a moment of madness. I'm happy the way I am." But even as I uttered those words, I felt they sounded wrong. The truth was that singing tonight, however softly and briefly, had awakened something in me. A passion I thought I had put aside. We were so engrossed in our conversation that we didn't immediately notice the man who approached our table. "Excuse me," he says, startling us both. "My name is Javier Mendoza. I'm a music producer and I couldn't help overhearing your conversation." Sofia and I exchanged surprised looks. Javier continued, "I was sitting right behind you during the concert. I heard your impromptu performance. It was truly extraordinary. I felt my cheeks flush." "Oh, it was nothing, really. Just a momentary lapse." Javier shook his head. "No, it was much more than that. Your voice has a rare quality, an emotion, a depth that I haven't heard in a long time. I'd love to hear more." He pulled a business card out of his pocket and handed it to me. "If you're interested, I'd like to give you a tryout. I think you have great potential." I took the card mechanically, too stunned to answer. Javier waved goodbye and walked away, leaving us speechless. "Isabel," exclaimed Sofia as soon as he was out of her reach. "This is unbelievable. You have to call him back." But I hesitated. "I don't know, Sofia. I have a life here, a job I love. Carlos." Sofia took my hands between hers. "Isabel, listen to me. You have an extraordinary gift. It would be a crime not to at least explore this opportunity. And Carlos loves you. He will support you, whatever you decide." That night I returned home with a blank head. Carlos was waiting for me, worried that I might be late. "Isabel, are you okay?" he asked when he saw my worried expression. I told him everything, the concert, my improvised song, Javier, and his offer. Carlos listened attentively, without interrupting me. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then, to my surprise, he smiled. "Isabel, my love. I think you should do it." "What?" I asked, dumbfounded. "The audition," he says. "I think you should go." I looked at him in disbelief. "But our life here, my job." Carlos took my face in his hands. "Isabel, I love you. I want you to be happy. If this opportunity can bring you happiness, you have to take it. We'll figure out the rest. The next few days were a whirlwind of preparations. I called Javier, who was delighted to hear from me. He scheduled the audition for the following week. I spent all my free time rehearsing, and my voice filled our apartment from morning to night. Carlos supported me unwaveringly and encouraged me constantly. Finally, the day of the audition arrived. I was a nervous wreck, but as soon as I started singing, everything vanished. It was just me and the music. When I finished, there was a moment of silence. Then Javier stood up and applauded. "That was magnificent, Isabel. Really great. I'd like to offer you a contract." I was speechless. A contract? It was more than I had dared to hope for. "I don't know what to say," I stammered. Javier smiles. "You don't have to decide right away. Take your time to think about it and talk it over with your family. But know that I truly believe you have a bright future in music." I returned home in a daze. Carlos was waiting for me, anxious to hear the news. When I told him everything, he gave me a big hug. "I'm very proud of you, my love," he said. "But what should I do?" I asked, still undecided. Carlos looked me straight in the eye. "What is your heart telling you, Isabel?" I closed my eyes, listening to the little voice inside me. And for the first time in a long time, I heard it clearly. She sang. I think I want to try," I say softly. "But I'm afraid. What if I fail?" Carlos smiled. "Then you've tried. And I'll be there, no matter what. We're a team, remember?" The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. I accepted Javier's offer, took a leave of absence from the university and started working on my first album. Dolores, to my surprise, was delighted with the news. "I knew you'd eventually realize your potential," she said proudly. The road was not easy. There were moments of doubt, sleepless nights, and exhausting days in the studio. But every time I sang, I knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be. 6 months later, when I got on stage at the Palau de la Música Catalana to give my first solo concert, I realized how much my life had changed. In the audience I could see Carlos, my parents, Sophia, and even Dolores, all beaming with pride. When I started singing, I knew that I had finally found my true voice. A voice that was no longer afraid to be heard, a voice that could touch hearts and souls. And as the last notes faded away and the audience rose to their feet to give a standing ovation, I realized that Dolores' plan, which was supposed to humiliate me at my wedding, had actually opened the door to the realization of my dearest dream. Life has a strange way of getting us where we need to be. And I, Isabel, was exactly where I was meant to be. On stage, my voice soaring freely, my heart singing its own melody of happiness and fulfillment.